Hey, everybody. Welcome to True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. I'm Kristi Brower here with my co-host, sister, and partner in crime, Katie Weaver. Hey, Katie.
Hello.
Oh, are you excited? We're doing a weird case, you guys. We're doing a
Oh,
really, really weird case.
my God. Yes, we are.
I picked a doozy for this. Once a week, we do a case where we do a solved case that's more of us just sort of telling you a story and giving you some analysis. And so that's what this is. But it's when I sent it to Katie, I'm like, I want to do this. What do you think? Because it's really gross, but it's very
and yes, we should. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We're junkies, dude. We are. What can we say?
We're weird. I mean, we're
crime all the time, right?
Right. We're true crime aficionados to have any interest in this case whatsoever. But you know what? We know that you guys are true crime weirdos too, so you're gonna like this. And hate yourself for liking it, probably, but it's okay.
That's all right. It's a lot. So should we just jump right into it?
I think we do it.
Hey, we're going to talk about Elizabeth Bathory. You guys probably know who this is. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. But this is
did not.
Didn't you? Oh, I saw her in a documentary recently, and I'd heard this story before, and I went, oh, we have to cover this. Okay, so this was in Hungary. And she was born in 1560, died in 1649. So this is an old case. She was a noblewoman from the family of Bathory. So they owned land in what is the kingdom, now the Kingdom of Hungary. Or I guess it's now Hungary, Slovakia, and Romania. So it was in that area. She has actually been labeled from the Guinness Book of World Records the most prolific female murderer. Yes. But we don't actually exactly know how many she killed.
No, I mean, some of her associates had guesstimated that it could be upwards of 600 young girls.
Yeah, when she went to trial, they used the number 650, but it was still kind of a guess, which is kind of horrifying. So let's get into this.
I guess what, you lose count after 50? I mean,
right? I know. I mean, clearly she didn't know, nor did she care how many. She wasn't keeping track. These were people that didn't have any meaning for her, unfortunately. So, of course, we know she's a royal, kind of in Hungary area. She was engaged at 10 years old to Count Ferenc Nadasdy. Okay. He was of the Nadasdy family, back in the day when that was a really big thing to be of a certain family and everything. So this was one of those political arranged marriages, within the aristocracy to maintain power and stuff. Elizabeth's social standing was actually better than her husband's. So she refused to take his last name. That's why, even though she was married, she continued to be a Bathory. She didn't want to give that up because that would have been a step down. They were married when she was 15 and he was 19.
A quick word about her childhood, though, before we move further, is that when she was still a child and living under her parents' roof, her dad was brutal. He was brutal to the staff, and he allowed his children to be brutal and violent with their staff. It wasn't a shocking thing to see both subjects and staff being brutally beaten. She was encouraged to be mean to those below her. And so her family was very much, it had ingrained violence into her.
Yes. Yeah. Also, she had epilepsy as a child, probably coming from the inbreeding that happened around that time with the royals, with aristocracy. So they called it falling sickness back then and clearly didn't understand what it was. But one of the treatments was rubbing blood of someone who did not suffer from the falling sickness on the lips of the epileptic, or giving them a mix of non-sufferer's blood and a piece of skull, which, definitely meant that non-sufferer was dead. So it's thought that maybe some of the things she did later in life were trying to cure her illness, or at least that's where she got that it was okay to, drink other people's blood. I don't know. So no one's sure, but that is believed to be part of the reasons she did some of the things that she did.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so she got married. Her wedding gift was a castle. We're talking major privilege and money here.
Yeah.
And let's see. So, sorry, let me find my spot here. So there was a lot of stuff that went on politically around her husband. He became the chief commander of the Hungarian troops and led a war against the Ottomans. So she was basically on her own and in charge of everything while he was gone. Mm-hmm. And she definitely did not see herself as, not being in charge of everything. She was very assertive. Let's just say it that way.
Yeah.
Let's see. So
well, I think she always, because she came from more status than he did, just always allowed herself that, as well as a child, was so privileged by her parents to literally do whatever she wanted. Right. That she believed she could, and so she did.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
So she was known to intervene on the behalf of destitute women. This part's creepy as hell because we know why. You're going to find out why. Including a woman whose husband was captured by the Ottomans and a woman whose daughter was raped and impregnated. So she was supposedly doing this really nice stuff, taking in women who, were in need of help and stuff. So her husband died in 1604 at age 48.
Yeah.
So he'd been sick for a long time, and he got ill and never fully recovered. And so then when he died, he entrusted his heirs to not Elizabeth, someone named Georgi Thurzo. And this person would eventually lead the investigation into her crimes. So here's what we know about the investigation. Between 1602 and 1604, there were some rumors spreading around the kingdom about her. And a Lutheran minister made a complaint against her publicly and actually in the court in Vienna. So the Hungarian authorities took a while, but they finally decided maybe they ought to look into what's going on here. They had all these witness statements against her that she was doing some really terrible things. And she was killing young girls. And so according to all these testimonies, her first victims were girls that were 10 to 14 years old. And so she started killing young girls. She's at a school, abducting them. They would go to school and then they would never come back, basically. She was accused of beating, burning, mutilating their hands, biting the flesh of their faces and arms and other body parts, or freezing or starving them to death. And so then there was this talk of the use of needles, and there was all kinds of torture, all of this. This is what was alleged against her.
Right.
So then they start identifying these girls that have died or disappeared while they were at this school. And that their bodies appeared to have some, indications of torture. Right. So let's break down what she was actually doing, because I think this is the most important part. She was bathing in their blood, rubbing it all over her face, bathing in it, drinking it. She had convinced herself it would keep her young. And that it would make her, not age, that it would heal her, that it would make her powerful. And it had to be young women. So it was always women that were younger than her. And she was literally, like, some people have referred to her as the Hungarian vampire. because she
Yeah.
was literally like bloodletting. So one
Mhm.
of the things that they may not have known at the time, you think about forensically on these bodies, they
Yeah.
found signs of torture, but what they didn't realize is that they were drained of their blood. And they may
Yeah.
not have, recognized that that was what was actually going on, is that she was,
Mhm.
somewhere around 650
Yeah.
people, women, young girls and young women. She
Yep.
drained their
Well,
blood
she
and
had multiple dungeons in her castle where, the torturous things were happening, and she had multiple accomplices
Mhm.
that were helping her. It's not as if she was just doing this by herself, hardly.
How could
She
she have
had
been?
No, she had some accomplices that were just as involved as she was in, obviously, they were under her, advisement, or under her, rule, but they were doing a lot of this stuff. I mean, she had no problem cutting people's fingers off and, biting and, all of these awful things. But she had other women, and they were all women except for one, I believe, her
Mhm.
accomplices, and they were right along with her.
They
Like,
were.
that slays me how much help she had.
Although, considering who she was and the station she had, and obviously how brutal she was, would you dare have
Yeah,
told her no at that time, you know? You think you think about, they probably knew it was either go along with it or die.
yeah, yeah. But I think that some of them got sicker and meaner as they went along, and they were
Yes.
clearly enjoying this as much as she was.
Well, I just think they were all insane and that they'd gone insane, you know? And you think about, like, what kind of medical things could have been wrong with them after drinking that much blood and, being
Yeah.
exposed to. We know now that, blood is dangerous, that if a
Mhm.
person has any kind of a disease, you come in contact with their blood, some of those diseases will give you that,
Sure.
you can get that disease from blood. Not
Mhm.
always, but I can only
Well,
imagine what
mhm.
she must have been exposed to.
Yep. Well, and even when she was married and her kids were little, she was way too many times had called priests out to read last rites and do little funerals for, maids,
Yeah,
or servant girls who died of cholera. It was always who died of cholera who had clearly been tortured.
yeah,
And that was the one priest that finally got involved, and actually made a complaint against her. He had complained to her, and her husband had to try to smooth it over. This was a
yeah,
few years before he died, because, of course, she was angry and stormed out of the church, but he basically said, you can't keep doing this, and, the Lord is going to make you pay for these crimes." And, of course, then, they were mad at him because how dare he make these accusations, but it was always cholera that she claimed they died from, even though they were obviously injured,
right.
It's but the other part of that is that lots of people knew she was doing this, and they weren't, they were mostly servants and paupers, and they didn't have the right to take a court case against a noble person, and
No,
some parents sold their children to her willingly because she would also pay. So they would pay their young, or, pay her to take their young maiden off of their hands so that
and
she
she
could
would
then
do that.
torture them to death.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a very different time, I know, but it is hard to fathom that. And it was certainly a time in which she was very much in a position of power,
Yeah.
which is very much evidenced by the fact that she was, in fact, found guilty
Yeah.
of these horrendous crimes. And so then what they did is they confined her in her castle.
Yeah.
They just
Well, to a
imprisoned her.
dungeon in her castle.
Yeah, but in her own castle. Like, they didn't take her to
Yeah.
prison or whatever. They just
Mhm.
imprisoned her in her own
Yeah.
castle. She was,
Yeah.
imprisoned there for the rest of her life. When she died at age 54,
Yeah.
she was locked in a bricked-in room, like, she couldn't have any contact with other people. They did finally decide maybe they should keep her away from the rest of the human race, which was good.
I mean, weird. Yeah.
Um, but it's hard to say because some documents say that she could move freely throughout the castle, some said she was in this room, she couldn't leave. So it's hard to know exactly because it was a very long time ago.
Mhm. Right. Right.
She
Well, and
left.
her associates at that point were also dealt with. They
Yeah,
were actually tried first.
yeah.
And one of them was a woman who came into her life when she was pretty young, who was believed to be a witch, Of course she was a witch.
Always right.
And she was a big part of this, she was probably her number one right-hand woman. And when they finally busted her, the police, or the authorities that came, and along, I believe, with a priest that all came together, they hid in the bushes outside of her castle, and they watched her and the who they called the witch
Mhm.
come outside, and she said an incantation of
Mm.
protection
Mhm.
around Elizabeth and around the castle, and then they went back inside. And so then these men crept around the side of the castle to the servants' doors to go into the kitchen, and there was a dead body of a recently bludgeoned young girl right next to the back door.
Mhm.
So they went in, and they could hear screaming, and managed to make it down to one of the dungeons where they were actively torturing and murdering a young girl at that time.
Right.
And so, so one of the associates was that woman.
Right.
And she and one of the others, when they were both ordered for, torture and execution,
Mhm.
and they both had their fingers torn off one by one before they were killed.
Oh, God.
Mhm.
Wow. Well, and there were a bunch of servants that confessed to being a part of it, but they were
Yeah.
tortured, and so
Uh-huh.
it's not really known if they
Mhm.
were actually a part of how many of them knew or what they knew, but they were executed.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, just totally insane, just the kind of stuff that wouldn't happen today, we hope, but you never know for sure.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
died in her sleep. One night she, complained to her bodyguard that her hands were cold, and he told her, "It's nothing, mistress, just go lie down." She did, and she never woke up.
Uh-huh.
Can you imagine all the stuff she must have had wrong with her from ugh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Honestly,
horrifying.
the fact that she wasn't executed for this, I mean, the privilege of that is astonishing.
It is absolutely astonishing that she was allowed to live out her her days, after doing what she did, and to have gotten away with it for so long as she did is stunning also.
Yeah, because everybody knew.
Yeah,
It seems as though it's not that there was really any secret that she was a murderess, wench. Everybody knew, but there was no recourse
yeah, they're
until they
just
finally found a way to create some recourse.
yeah, and still that was basically just lock her up so she couldn't kill anybody else until she died.
Mhm.
I
Well, and
guess
of
we
course,
also do
when
that now
she
in the US, so
well, yeah. Well, of course, when she was busted, she blamed it on her servants. "It
yes,
wasn't
yeah,
me, it was them.
so
They are the ones that did everything," and,
so of course
luckily
they all died, for it, thanks, and
yeah,
yeah. So, pretty heinous story, but
mhm,
kind of the beginning of an awareness that women can commit these kinds of horrifying crimes.
yeah,
We see lots more in the news and historically that we see men committing these kinds of things. But I honestly think that there are more women, but they get away with it for longer because people don't
yeah.
suspect them.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
I mean, who is going to suspect this of this woman?
Right.
It's kind of horrifying, but we thought it was an interesting one. We wanted to share it with
Yeah,
you. There's been a lot of research done on it. And of course, it was so long ago that it's very hard to know for sure what is fact and what has been,
yeah,
embellished and what was actually true.
mhm,
But, we think that the basic underpinnings of the story were in fact a real
yeah,
thing. How they exactly played out, we don't know for sure, but
yeah,
definitely Elizabeth Bathory did, like to bathe in and drink the blood of young women.
yep, yep.
I imagine there would be a whole slew of psychiatric diagnoses for her today.
I'm sure, I'm sure. Yep. Well, and, you know, researchers chomping at the bit to, get a DNA sample because, and try and figure out all of the things wrong with her physically as
I would be
well.
so curious. And that where she's buried is not known. So there's never been able to be any study of her. Not that there would be a whole lot left at this point, but it would have been
Yeah.
interesting. But her story also is part of where the stories about vampires come from.
Right.
This area, Hungary, Romania area where she was from, she was, at one point known as the Hungarian vampire. So
Yeah.
I wonder how much, those stories really are based in actual like happenings that then kind of turn supernatural in the storytelling.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
it's unbelievable.
That's Elizabeth Bathory for you. Feel free to look her up on some documentaries because there are lots of them about her, and there's lots of stories about her on the internet as well. But for the true crime brain, it's pretty interesting to think about why someone would do the things that she did.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
I think that's one of the reasons, or maybe the main reason, we all love true crime is because we want to know why.
Yep.
I would never do something like this. You would never do something like this. Why would someone do something like this? That's definitely the thing that I'm always very curious about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this one is definitely a mind bender. I mean, some thoughts. Maybe psychologically she was never solid. I think that's possible. Obviously, the brutality that she was exposed to as a kid made its mark. And the privilege that she was exposed to as a kid made its mark, obviously.
Oh, so much so.
Her father would have allowed her to murder servants in front of him. He didn't care. He was good with that. He wanted her to be brutal.
Right.
And so surely that's where some of this started. But what the hell,
It went to such an intense level that you really go.
Well, and of course the belief in, feeding her blood to try to stave off the epilepsy. Surely that played a role. It obviously did,
Had to.
But
Yeah.
So was this just a bad cocktail?
Which I think so often is the case when you look at people that, commit serial murders. There is a bad combination of life experiences, physiology, psychology, it's never just one thing.
No. But then we add the combination of, being in a place of, in a position of power and in a place where, the special pups got to do whatever they wanted, because of the station she held, and there just was there wasn't much backlash. Well, until there was. I mean, obviously there was a way because they got there, but
they did. But for so long, I feel like she just felt like her power was limitless. She could do literally anything.
Well, and my understanding from what I've read basically is that nobody dared, because if you were going to question a countess and accuse her of a crime, you better by God be right and be able to convict that, or you would be dead yourself.
Yes, definitely.
You might be dead for even making the accusation. And so it was just really dangerous for anybody to try to prosecute her or do anything about it because, unless they were able to get someone of a higher station to care about it. And they didn't, because they too were pulling shit. And so it was unprosecutable for so long until the public outcry was so loud, and until they saw it in black and white themselves or full color.
50 witness statements when they finally went to the courts with it and said, we've got to do something. There were 50 witness statements. So there was a real preponderance there, but people were literally risking their lives just accusing her. So a good lesson in too much power is never a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. This has been our representation of Elizabeth Bathory. And we are True Crime Paranormal with the Psychic Sisters. Don't forget to go to our website, and there you can send us case suggestions. You can join our email list. You can see the link to go to our merch store. We have a brand new merch store with some really fun stuff.
Yes.
But be sure to check that out. So it's truecrimeparanormalpodcast.com. We love to hear from you. That's one of our favorite things. So drop us a line. Tell us about your favorite case you'd like us to present.
For sure. All right, guys.
Have a great day.